Hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It's Nitro once again, and this is the finale of the Monday Night Wars. Right off the bat, you may notice I have my new camera, I have my new mic. Admittedly, not as good as I would have liked them to be. For starters, my camera is zoomed out quite a bit, so I did have to kind of update the background a little bit. Had to move some things around. I don't, you know how it is, but try to bear with me. And of course, with my mic, yes, as that's not your phone or device, however you're watching this on, that is my mic that's kind of making the echo. I've tried fiddling around with it. I tried like messing with it, and it's funny because when I first plugged it in to test it out, it was fine when I opened it. Like it was fine, no echo or anything like that. But then as I further tried testing it, then that's when it came up unfortunately. So I'm trying to kind of contend with that. I kind of reached a compromise where I kind of turned it down so that it wouldn't like pick up a lot of feedback, but it does still have kind of that echo, unfortunately. So, I do apologize for that. So please definitely do bear with me. But we have quite a bit to do this week. We have this. I'm gonna try to get caught up on all the events, and it's from WWE and AEW and NXT, starting from Money in the Bank and on. So tomorrow I'm planning on doing Money in the Bank and Heat Wave. NXT Heat Wave Wednesday is going to be SummerSlam and All In. Thursday is going to be Tales from the Labyrinth, as per usual. That's coming back because I've taken way too many off weeks when it comes to that. Friday is going to be Bash in Berlin and NXT No Mercy. And then Saturday is going to be a few things. It's going to be System Shock Radio, and it's going to be my predictions for All Out later on the night. But Saturday is also my birthday, so I have a very special review coming out, and then kind of go from there. I don't know if I'm gonna do, because if you remember last year on the channel, I kind of dedicated the whole month of September to kind of like childhood month, kind of like whole birthday month celebration. I don't know if I'm gonna necessarily do that this year, but I'll probably do some sprinkles of it every now and then throughout the month of September. But otherwise, I don't know if I'm gonna fully dedicate it to full birth month celebration like I did the previous year. So now that is out of the way, hey, let's get into the Monday Night Wars. Let's get into what we came here for. If you remember last year, technically last year, that being 1999 as we move into 2000, but last time on the Monday Night Wars, last time we had the kind of Waterloo moment, as it were, for WCW, where they gave away the finish to Mankind vs. The Rock, happening on the January 4th episode of Raw, and kind of spoiled that Mankind would be winning the WWE Championship. Hip saying, that would put the butts in the seats, and it definitely did, because as it apparently turned the tide, a lot of people switched over from Nitro to Raw, and those who stuck with WCW Monday Nitro, their reward for being loyal to the programming was the finger poke of doom. Meanwhile, those who switched over got to see Mankind win the WWF Championship for the first time. Finally, get his moment in the sun. And so, Nitro had never beaten Raw in the ratings again. So, because of that, and because of some of the other stuff we're going to get into, the Monday Night War, in a way, at this point in time where we are, or in terms of like 2000, 2001, admittedly, the war at this point is kind of a foregone conclusion. It's pretty much a formality. It's pretty much a mercy blow. To put into perspective for those who play Mortal Kombat, we've passed the actual battle part. Now we're just waiting on the fatality, and we're definitely gonna get to that, because 2000 and 2001. Whoo boy! At the very least for WCW, to quote the legendary Anakin Skywalker, this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the fun begins. So, of course, we're going to start off with the ratings, and then we're going to move into our notes as per usual. But the notes is where things get really fun and really interesting. Both for good and for bad. Without further ado, let's get right into it. If you've seen these before, if you haven't, definitely check out the rest of my Monday Night Wars analysis. I might do like a compilation style video where I like put them all together, and that way you're able to watch them all and watch it pretty much from beginning to end. So I might do that if I remember to. But also, if you've seen these before, you kind of already know how we're doing it. But if you haven't, pretty much, I'm not gonna go week by week and talk about the ratings from each and every week. But I am going to mention some trends, some things that we're seeing in some evolutions, some de-evolutions, and so we're gonna go from there. As you can see, there are a couple weeks that went uncontested. We have the July 17th episode of Monday Nitro that didn't occur, then, and same with December 11th and Christmas, December 25th, and you may notice kind of a different format for these ratings. You're like, Nigel, did you just change the format? Did you feel like, were you messing around? Were you pulling a rib on us? Were you change the format from this to this? No, I actually had to find a different site because the site I used, that being the fandom for the Monday Night Wars that showed the ratings, unfortunately stopped after 2000. And granted, that was kind of, they probably did that as a mercy kill kind of thing, but you need the full ratings. You want to at least give WCW a bit of fighting chance. So I had to outsource it to a different website, and that website actually showed all the ratings for as well as for like Thunder and SmackDown and everything. Which SmackDown and Thunder I haven't even mentioned. SmackDown was introduced. It was in 1999, pretty much kind of like a continuation, kind of like secondary kind of B show in a way for WWE, so that things kind of carry over from there. Kind of similar to how AEW kind of does Rampage or even Collision and nowadays it wouldn't really become its own brand until the brand splits. Actually, the following year in 2002. But for now, it's kind of a second mini Raw in a way. Hey, almost kind of like Heat, but not really. And then Thunder was also kind of the same thing. Now, Thunder kind of was a lot more in line with like AEW Rampage. I even showed those ratings, but I declined to bring them up because it's the Monday Night Wars. We're concerned about the Monday shows, that being Raw and Nitro. We have the uncontested weeks, but now let's see some of the trends. So Raw is doing sixes. Like, they start off hot in the beginning of the year up until the February 14th episode, Valentine's Day, if you will, where they drop down to a 4.4, but immediately pick it back up to a 5.9 the following week. They continue going high, even getting a 7.1. Even getting a 7.1 on the May 22nd episode. Staying within the 5 and 6 range. They do dip down again to the 4s, or it's around on August 28th and September 4th, otherwise staying with the 5, 6s is and stuff like that. They do dip down to a 3.8 on the Christmas episode. I imagine that might be the case because people are spending time with their families, and so you want to spend time with your family, whether it be your parents, your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, and maybe not crowd around the TV. At least that's kind of just a theory on my part, or it's a game theory, if you will. But I don't know for sure, so don't quote me on that. But moving into 2001, we see mostly the same up until. I do like how it shows going into the weeks how it's got the January 1st to 4th, then January 7th to the 11th, then 14th, 18th, 21 to 25, stuff like that. Oh, um, so we see those ratings there, and I noticed that we forgot the averages, so we're gonna do it live. But first let's see what Nitro's doing. And, so Nitro not faring as well as Raw. So Nitro's got the threes. He's got the two who's dipping down to even a 1.8 on the April 3rd episode. But that, of course, will have a significance, at least the following week's episode. So staying within the twos and the threes, they do not go they don't go up to the four at all. They are mainly flying under the radar, hovering around the three to around like the three, and so the three range. Don't go up to four, or they only dip down to one. The one that 1.88 here. They only dip down once, which admittedly for WCW at this time is kind of impressive. But yeah, so otherwise staying very low. Raw's average here, we're gonna calculate it live, and you can see kind of the formula that I'm using for it. And I do notice a significant echo. The mic doesn't like me getting so close, unfortunately. But nevertheless, so we have the Raw average, and pretty much how I calculate it is I do the formula in kind of like a sort of Excel or equivalent tutorial. Well, you take the average, you just type in average, and then you can drag down. And thankfully it did it for me. We'll see if we do it for the other ones, so you can see. So we'll take the average, we can tap over and calculate that. So we see. I just had it. So average. I see what's going on. Okay, so take the average, and we can take that average, and we see that, and then we can move it over. We can decrease the decimal places, and we'll decrease it there. So Raw has about an average of a 5.7 for 2000 and for 2001. And the reason that I combined 2000 and 2001, the same reason why I combined 1995 to 1996, is because 2001, similar to 1995, wasn't the full year for Nitro, and you're gonna find out why. We take the average there, and then again, let's see what Nitro's average is. So you take the average, and then you can type them in, or you can just drag it, and thankfully it takes out automatically for like the NAs and stuff like that. And so you can take that average, put that there, hit the enter, and not as good in that average. So if we decrease the decimal places like so, we see that Nitro manages an average of about 2.6, which is really not great, unfortunately. Raw absolutely demolishes. Like I said, kind of foregone conclusion, and Raw absolutely annihilating Nitro in the ratings. But now let's get to the notes. Let's see what's happening here in WF and in WCW. But it is worth mentioning, I think, something I forgot to mention actually during the 1999 segment, in terms of notable people / storylines in WF. Admittedly, I probably forgot quite a bit, but how could I forget the Brood? The Brood that I was being Edge and Christian and Gangrel. Edge started off kind of like a loner, kind of on the street and everything, and kind of implied he was homeless, is attacking random people, pretty much a tortured soul, and he would enter through the crowd. Eventually, Christian joined up with him, and for a while they were billed as like brothers, like they were treated pretty much like brothers, which they looked alike. This is before we got like short hair Christian and short hair Edge. Now I think about it, but this is when they had like the long flowing movie star looks with the long flowing blonde hair, almost akin to like Thor. Oh, uh, so, yeah, yeah. So they were paired together, or they teamed up with Gangrel as the Brood. Eventually, they dumped Gangrel, and Gangrel adopted the Hardys, and they became the new Brood. And then eventually they dumped Gangrel as well. The Hardys started off being managed by Doc Hendricks, aka Michael Hayes. They were managed by him for a little bit. They won the services of Terry Runnels via the Terry Runnels Invitational, I believe, at No Mercy 1999. So they were managed by her for a little bit, and so yeah. But we see how the tag team division kind of forms. But yeah, so I just had to bring that up, and we will kind of revisit it. But I can't believe I forgot. At least I think I forgot to bring it up during my look at 1999 for WF. If I did bring it up, then totally disregard this whole point of the video. But yeah. So we're now getting into some other stuff that's going on. For stars in 2000, we have two returns, and similar to combining in the ratings for 2001, we're kind of combining a lot of the storylines for 2000 2001. For stars, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker returned, both returning pretty soon after WrestleMania. Unfortunately, because both were out, Austin needed neck surgery. The Undertaker had a groin tear. They were out. They missed WrestleMania and everything, and it definitely showed with WrestleMania 2000 not being looked on too fondly. But they both came back, and how they wrote Steve Austin off in storyline was that he got ran over, or so it was pretty much like a whodunit kind of thing, and trying to figure out who ran over Steve Austin, and even some eyes point to the Undertaker, but eventually it was revealed to be Rikishi, which a lot of people it caused a lot of people to scratch their heads. Rikishi, very fun loving, was part of Too Cool and everything. Which Too Cool? How did I forget Too Cool here in my notes as well? One of the most overact, including having that legendary moment in Madison Square Garden where all three of them were in the Royal Rumble at the same time, and they took a little mini dance break. But Rikishi was revealed to be the one who ran over Austin, which a lot of people were like, Rikishi, this guy who is known as being very fun-loving and very for the people and everything. And Rikishi, of course, infamously did it for The Rock, because The Rock was feuding with Austin, so kind of trying to throw The Rock under the bus. But it turns out Triple H was the mastermind behind it after all, which a lot of people feel like was kind of the end goal, was that Triple H was going to be the one responsible. But ultimately they decided to try to swerve us, and it didn't really work. So Austin and Triple H kind of had their feud, including Triple H being almost killed by Austin in a forklift in the car at Survivor Series 2000. But next up is the Radicals. So Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Perry Saturn, and Dean Malenko from WCW, all relatively big parts of WCW, jumped ship from WCW to WWF. They were in the crowd and everything, and eventually made their way to WWF programming. Were aligned with Triple H for a little bit before going off and kind of doing their own thing, and they did try to get them to stay, including them popping the WCW World Championship on Chris Benoit, but yeah, it didn't work, and they made their way over and would go on to be part of WWF programming, and all of them would kind of have some careers in WWF. More so with Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. Eddie actually was fired for a time. In part due to his substance abuse issues and everything. And eventually he overcame them and came back, and the rest is history for him. But then next up, as I was mentioning earlier, there is the tag team situation, and as the Hardys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian pretty much made tag team wrestling cool for a little while, including the awesome matches, not just at WrestleMania 2000 and the ladders match at WrestleMania 2000, not just the first ever TLC match at SummerSlam 2000, but then the TLC rematch at WrestleMania 17, aka WrestleMania X7. All matches that are awesome, all matches I recommend, and all matches I actually reviewed on the channel. So if you haven't already, go check out those reviews. But yeah, just phenomenal stuff they were doing. Of course, the Dudleys coming over from ECW, who now the Dudleys, he's unfortunately kind of got some secondhand heat because they came in after what happened with Public Enemy. So Public Enemy came in to WF. A lot of people were still mad at them because they first signed with WCW, but they eventually left. So a lot of people felt like they were betrayed by them, and eventually they made their way over to the WF. But by then they had a lot of heat, and it led to the APA pretty much being sent in to stiff them and to pretty much make them pay for their transgressions, and pretty much drove them out of WF. And that's exactly what happened. So the Dudleys overcame and persevered and went on to have their career in WF. But then next up is the return of Cactus Jack. Yes, as Mankind No More, Mick Foley brought back the Cactus Jack persona, and he feuded with Triple H for a little bit. Including at both Royal Rumble and No Way Out in 2000. So. Cactus Jack returned there, and from there, Mick Foley became Commissioner Foley. This was back when they had like commissionership, which is kind of like today's equivalent of like what they do with the general manager with like Adam Pearce or Nick Aldis and everything. But Commissioner Foley, very very wacky but very beloved, fun character. Was Commissioner Foley. And some of the high jinks he got up to. Then there was the Hardcore Championship, and more specifically when Crash Holly held it. So with the Hardcore Championship, pretty much like back then's version of the 24/7 Championship that WWE did a little while ago. Which about 5 years ago. It's crazy. It was 5 years ago, but. But yeah, especially with Crash Holly. Crash Holly is actually the one who introduced the 24/7 rule. Now, the Hardcore Championship wasn't always 24/7 like what they did with the 24/7 Championship. It was defended in like actual matches, stuff like that. He even made 1 or 2 WrestleManias. But with Crash Holly, he did, the 24/7 rule where he defended it anytime and anywhere. And it definitely took a toll on poor Crash Holly to the point where he couldn't sleep because he had to defend it so much. And eventually the Hardcore Championship kind of phased out, but that was a fun storyline, including Crash Holly defending it at a friggin' ball pit at Funland, USA. But then there's Right to Censor, which kind of a I don't know if I'll full on use polarizing, but I know a lot of people will kind of liked or dug kind of the idea of Right to Censor, and others kind of really didn't. The one thing I definitely didn't dig was their freaking theme song, because it was pretty much just like sirens, and not like the cool Scott Steiner sirens. I'm talking about like the annoying, very annoying, hurt your ear sirens. But pretty much, W's answer to like the PTC, FTC, organizations like that, pretty much telling WWE to like WF at the time to tone down stuff, of which WF kind of did, but they definitely did it under duress, and they made fun of it. With Right to Censor, that being this very like super conservative group consisting of like Steven Richards, not Stevie Richards, Steven Richards. They made his name very proper to fit the gimmick. So it was Steven Richards, it was Val Venis, it was Godfather. It was the Godfather, who was renamed the Good Father. It was Bull Buchanan, and it was Ivory. Now, especially with Val Venus and the Godfather there, or gimmicks. Essentially, essentially being part of like the joke where their gimmicks consist of a former adult star and a former pimp essentially. Yeah, but they had their thing going on for a little while, and they were a big part of WTV for like a while. Well, and were actually a pretty big faction for a little bit. I'm not talking about big like they kept expanding like NWO or something like that, but yeah. And then finally there was DX 2000, and kind of the reunion of D Generation X that lasted for a little while. But now moving into WCW side of things, this is where the fun begins because WCW for all intents and purposes was a sinking ship. Probably was not going to turn things around. Probably was on its last legs, and its like last breath and everything. Its last gasp when it comes to trying to hold on and maintain. But you know what? They may have been going out, but they were not going out without a fight. They were gonna go, but they weren't gonna go quietly. Yeah, so we start off first with the big championship reset on April 10th of 2000. WCW stripped everyone of their titles. Yes, so Eric Bischoff was brought back in and on TV in a position of power for the first time in a while. Essentially, he trying to reboot WCW. Wouldn't be the last time they would at least attempt to reboot WCW, but yeah. They were, so they decided that they would strip everyone of the championships, and we would have new tournaments and everything to crown all new champions. Now, if you wanted to reboot it, surely there was an easier way to do so instead of having to strip every one of their titles. To give kind of a comparison, when NXT became NXT 2.0, they didn't strip everybody of their titles. Everybody who was already champion and held on to their championships. It's just that over time they would slowly start to put them more on like the 2.0 talents, with some exceptions. But nevertheless, that's the next thing we have is the New Blood versus the Millionaires Club. The New Blood was a heel stable. Made up of a lot of the younger, newer talent in WCW, such as like the natural born thrillers of like Sean Stasiak, Sean O'Hare, stuff like that, and pretty much these guys who are going to revolutionize pretty much, essentially kind of like the new breed that they would do for like ECW, like the WWE version of ECW. Then there was a Millionaires Club who was made up more like the legends and veterans, and names like Lex Luger and Diamond Dallas Page, stuff like that, at taking on the newer, young, cocky, brash, arrogant, and not necessarily children, but younger guys. You get the idea, pretty much. They were having their feud, and that definitely did dominate a lot of the storylines for a while, especially in 2000. Then there was this. It's the thing that a lot of people associate with this period in WCW, and one of the things that a lot of people feel was the downfall of WCW, among other things, was their reliance on insider terminology. For the kind of wrestling insiders, those who are more so in the know within the business, more like the hardcore wrestling fan, and you probably know a lot of these terms. I just used one earlier. I used the term rib. But it's more so used within the bag among the boys, stuff like face, heel, face, heel, rib, work, shoot, stuff like that. All these insider terms and hers, but they brought it over to the outsiders and tried to use it to the wrestling fans and tuning in and trying to use all these insider terms, and trying way too hard to blur the lines between fiction and reality. Kayfabe and reality to the point where, and kayfabe is kind of another entire term, but pretty much to the point where nobody knew what the hell was going on. Nobody knew what was for real, what was in storyline, what was real, stuff like that, and it got super confusing. Now, the thing is, it's happened before. Like, I've seen it before. Obviously, CM Punk had his work shoot promo. Oh, he's had a couple actually. But he had his work shoot promo. We've had work shoot promos before from guys like Paul Heyman, Joey Styles, stuff like that. And sometimes they'll do little nods to it being all work and stuff like that, and like making references to like other gimmicks and other wrestlers, stuff like that. And kind of peel back the curtain a little bit. But the thing is, it's done in moderation. It's not something they do every single week. Imagine and that's done every single week to where they try way too hard to go overboard of, oh, what's a shoot, oh, what's a work, oh, what's real, what's fake, stuff like that. Like, again, it can be interesting if done correctly, and oftentimes they will inject real life feelings into storylines to give it that extra oomph. They kind of did it with like McIntyre and Punk, or like Punk and Rollins, stuff like that. But WCW pretty much went super overboard with it to the point where it got annoying, and to the point where it turned a lot of people away. Again, I can kind of see, like, it does to an extent drum up interest. Like, you can see people wanting to tune in to see whether things will blow and stuff like that. But when you're doing it every week and it's done in like the most the dumbest ways possible, it turns a lot of people away, unfortunately. But next up, we have a big one, and it's one we're going to get into in our review for this segment of the Monday Night Wars, and that one being the Bash at the Beach 2000 situation, which that's gonna be a fun one. But Hulk Hogan has left WCW. So Hogan leaves WCW. He was in the New Blood Millionaires Club storyline, and again, I can't get too much into it because, as I want to save it for that, it really goes down to Bash at the Beach. But yeah, Hogan eventually leaves WCW, and Scott Hall also is out of WCW at one point. Like Goldberg, which I forgot to mention, Goldberg had turned heel. Why? But Goldberg had turned heel and pretty much helped force out Scott Hall. So like 2/3 of the end of like the original 3 of the NWO, aka one of like the big things that did a lot of great business for WCW, who were out essentially. Granted, that was then. This is now, and the NWO had kind of run its course and run it into the ground. But it's still crazy how they were out. But obviously, we'll get more to that when we get into our review of Bash at the Beach. But next up is the big one, that being David Arquette winning the WCW World Championship. Now, to kind of give you a peer into my brain, I did think about reviewing Ready to Rumble for the Monday Night Wars, but unfortunately, with all the delays and stuff like that, had me wanting to get this out so it's not delayed even more. Unfortunately, it had to be cut due to time constraints, so it has to be left on the cutting room floor. But maybe I'll review it. Maybe I'll review it for like off a month or something down the line. But yeah, so David Arquette, the actor, won the WCW World Championship, which is still surreal how and why this was done. It was essentially done to promote the movie, but it was done way after the movie came out, and it really, really hurt. And the WCW World Championship, the World Heavyweight Championship, was essentially treated as a joke. And it really devalued it. It really devalued the company. David Arquette. It wasn't David Arquette's idea to put the title on himself. He said he didn't want to do it in retrospect, but yeah, it was a really, it was a really bad idea. Now David Arquette did kind of worked in reverse, where he did eventually he worked like the indie circuit and everything. I think he still wrestles on the indies. He's if I'm not mistaken, and he might be retired now, but I think he does still wrestle on the indies from time to time. But he did kind of give back, which is nice, and the proceeds from him winning the world championship he donates to the families of Owen Hart, so that was really good. But like, yeah, it was a really bad idea in hindsight. Like, imagine if they did that in today's WWE. Like imagine if they popped the WWE Championship, the top prize on say like Machine Gun Kelly or Jelly Roll. Well, now if they popped it on Logan Paul, like at least Logan's kind of now been in the business for a little bit, but it still wouldn't be the best idea. At least not where he's at currently. He's still, if he's gonna stick with WWE and actually like still fully commit to it then maybe I can see it. But like if I'm talking about like a total outsider just brought in for promo, you pop the top prize on him. And now, granted, he wasn't world champion for long, but yeah, it was really bad. Like, hey, if you want to pop a title on David Arquette, I'm not sure why, but if you want to pop any title on him, maybe go for like the hardcore championship, because that's more of a, yeah, WCW had its own hardcore championship, and we're obviously going to get to that, as you can see further down in the notes. But maybe pop like the hardcore championship, maybe the US championship, maybe like the tag team championship, if so he doesn't have to do the work and stuff up as well. Like at least with Logan Paul, they popped the United States Championship on him, and when celebrities have won championships in WWE, it's been like a joke title, or a title that doesn't really mean much, like the 24/7 Championship. But its top prize is the WCW World Championship on David Arquette. Really helped do WCW in, and really was more, and really was just yet another black eye in a sea of black eyes for WCW. But speaking of which, next up we go into Norman Smiley as hardcore champion, and screaming Norman Smiley, who became kind of hardcore champion, kind of became like a 1B hardcore legend, and dressed up in like hockey pads and stuff like that, and like hockey jerseys and stuff like that, and had, or like football jerseys, pretty much in a way to protect himself, kind of like hanging on to the hardcore title by hook or by crook. Look, pretty much transitioning into the hardcore section within WCW, the Hardcore Championship division, I meant to say. But that was a pretty fun gimmick that a lot of people liked. But next up, we have the debuts of Mike Awesome and Lance Storm, two guys from ECW, and they went in totally different directions. And Lance Storm came in and was almost immediately treated like a star, or like an absolute stud in WCW. You got his own faction. You got Team Canada, which Mike Awesome ironically would be a part of. He got his own faction. He won like the U.S. title, won like a bunch of titles. Pretty much was treated like a big deal in WCW. Who had a he didn't win the world title, but that probably would have been next if things weren't so topsy turvy. But Lance Storm definitely got a monster push. Mike Awesome, on the other hand, and not so much. And it's crazy because Mike Awesome is definitely, aside from like promos and everything, but that's what managers are for. Or Mike Awesome definitely had all the tools to be like a top guy and a top name, and almost I'd go as far. I know a lot of people won't. I'd go as far as to put the world championship on him, because he did come in as world champion in WCW. So Mike Awesome was ECW champion coming in, but got a apparently got a very big lucrative offer to join WCW, and so he did, and he was frustrated with not being paid by ECW, which ECW and talent being paid goes together pretty much like peanut butter and jelly. But But Mike Awesome eventually made his way over while still ECW champion, and that caused a whole debacle. Well, and eventually he had to drop it to Taz, which gave us that piece of history, which I also reviewed on the channel, where a WCW wrestler faced a WWF wrestler for the ECW championship in a ECW ring, and it definitely was very surreal. But yeah, Mike Awesome, they saddled him with some very lame gimmicks and made him almost like a total loser. They saddled him with like the fat chick thrower, which, I mean, hey, look, nothing against the big curvy women. In fact, if any of them are watching, hit my line. But at that point, it definitely was more of like a comedy demoralizing gimmick for Mike Awesome, and then he became that '70s guy, Mike Awesome, because that '70s show was a thing around there, and so he became that '70s guy, Mike Awesome. Both very dumb, very cringy, very corny gimmicks. And then he joined Team Canada. Like, hey, he turned heel, joined Team Canada, which hey, at least he's with Lance Storm, and at least he's Team Canada is being treated like kind of somewhat of a big deal. But then next up was Sting versus Vampiro. Oh, started off as teammates. It's then Vampiro turned on Sting, which of course, for Sting and being turned on is another legendary combination. But Vampiro turned on Sting, and they feuded for a lot of 2000 thereafter. But then finally, the big one, the WWF buyout. Yes, WWF bought their competition, WCW, and admittedly, kind of the lasting effects of that buyout is something I want to make a separate video about. That will happen at some point in the future. But yeah, so WWF, I should say, bought out WCW, leading to even Vince McMahon appearing on WCW programming, talking about buying his competition, and that the fate of WCW was in his hands, which is pretty crazy. You think about, but he bought them out, bought out ECW as well, and pretty much monopolized the wrestling market. He brought his two biggest competitions, and that's pretty much how the Monday Night Wars ended. But it's worth mentioning WCW was set to undergo yet another reboot and kind of another change. They were gonna take some time off, be off TV, and then come back with a whole totally different and new format. But they had their plug pulled by the network, even though Ted Turner fought against it. Unfortunately, the plug was pulled, and WCW was brought out by WWF. Pretty much how the Monday Night Wars ended. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I'm thinking about doing a full on retrospective for the Monday Night Wars and stuff like that. But I'm not entirely sure. But I will give a number of my thoughts here, just in case that video doesn't come to fruition. But as for MVPs, we have Steve Austin, and at least when he came back, and of course him eventually turning heel at WrestleMania 17, and of course there's the Alliance storyline, the WWF versus the Alliance storyline. Admittedly, that's a story for a whole nother time, and we'll probably do that next year. Since we did the Monday Night Wars this year, we'll probably save that for next year. Only because I'm not as prepped to go into that, and there is some other stuff I want to do before the before the year is over. And man, can you believe the year is almost over already? But then we have The Rock kind of doing his thing as well. Then we have Kurt Angle, who's still a pretty big part, even after that initial rookie year of 1999 to 2000. Kurt Angle still being a big part, and also a big part of the Alliance storyline. Same with The Rock and everything. Kurt Angle even being kind of a double agent for the Alliance. But again, when we do the Alliance storyline, we'll go into more detail about it there. Then there's the tag team vision, as I mentioned, with the Dudleys and Edge and Christian and the Hardys. There's the Undertaker, kind of, because Undertaker, I don't know if I mentioned this, but when Undertaker came back, he came back with a whole new gimmick. Actually, I didn't go into detail about the Undertaker's return. I just kind of mentioned it. So Undertaker came back, but he came back as Biker Taker. He came back as the American Badass. Would become Big Evil later on, but Undertaker coming back with a whole new coat of paint and a whole new look. And admittedly, it's more something that is beloved more in hindsight. But at the time, it was kind of weird. Undertaker, who was very gothic, very very undead, and stuff like that, coming back as like this biker and showing and being more human. He did get to show a lot more of his humanity and kind of his human side, which is nice, but it was kind of weird. And then there is Triple H. Now Triple H, unfortunately, tore his quads, so he missed the whole Goldang invasion. But Triple H still doing his thing as well. Really, he rising up to the main event level, for better or for worse. There's Triple H there. As for WCW, you know, the list kind of small, but and that's the truth. There was Booker T. Which we'll get into it more, or when we get to the Bastard Beast situation. But Booker T got his time in the sun. Jeff Jarrett still being the chosen one, and Jeff Jarrett. Because of how Jeff Jarrett left WWE and how he left kind of the controversial circumstances, pretty much fired right on air by Vince McMahon when he bought out WCW on its last episode. But it did lead to Jeff Jarrett founding NWA TNA, so there's that, I guess. Then there's Scott Steiner, who really continues to evolve, and then finally there's the undercard, because the main event scene was kind of messy, but the undercard was still somewhat fun, and it kind of helped people take their mind off things. But yeah, so the Monday Night Wars, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. What do I think? You know what? I'll save it for the. I was gonna say what do I think ruined WCW, but you know what? We will do the retrospective, so I will save it for kind of the retrospective. But as for this episode, thank you all so much for watching, and I may or may not include the retrospective in kind of the compilation video that I do for like the Monday Night Wars. But nevertheless, in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video, so you can see as soon as it drops. And let me know in the comments below your thoughts on this episode of the Monday Night Wars and the Monday Night Wars as a whole. Well, admittedly, I do wish I would have went into a little bit more detail on some things, but this was a fun look back. Unfortunately, I wasn't there to watch it live. I was for like the real heights of it around between 1995 and 1999. I wasn't live yet. Then I came pretty late into 2000, September 7th, and then 2001 I was still too young and wasn't watching wrestling at the time. I was just a baby, so obviously I don't remember it in time. But going back and kind of looking at it, it kind of through the somewhat limited lens, and thankfully I was able to find a lot of the info, but still very limited lens. And I wanted to. I did kind of ask some people their kind of thoughts on it, and they were gracious enough to provide their kind of thoughts on it, kind of their take on what was going on with the Monday Night Wars at the time. But even through the limited lens, I still had a lot of fun going back and looking into it. But nevertheless, in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends, and turn on post notifications. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.